Bright is a new Netflix original movie directed by David Ayer and stars Will Smith and Joel Edgerton, and is basically a cop crime action thriller with fantasy elements in it. Yeah, you know, like orcs, elves, fairies, that kind of thing. This movie easily has one of the weirdest concepts I have ever seen all year. I mean, who ever thought combining fantasy and crime drama was a good idea? I don't quite get the point of this movie's existence, and that's pretty obvious when you're watching it, because Netflix have made a very big deal about this movie. They've spent approximately $90 million on this movie, and they're pushing it as this huge blockbuster, it's a must-see kind of thing, and the end result is anything but a must-see. This is a pretty pathetic and actually quite boring movie. Now, before I completely rip into this movie, I just want to point out one positive that I actually found with Bright, and that's the look of the movie. The actual cinematography, special effects, and general aesthetic of the movie isn't that bad, and for the most part it is a nice movie to look at. It's just a shame that everything else around it is pretty crap. Now, personally, I am actually quite disappointed in David Ayer, especially with his more recent movies, because in the past he has made some absolutely fantastic movies that I love, such as End of Watch and Fury. I love those movies loads and loads and loads, and I actually think they're very underrated for what they are. And then he went and made Suicide Squad, which I still think is watchable, but it's still a steaming pile of crap. And now he's made this, and I don't quite get where he's trying to go with his movies. I can kind of see what he was trying to get at with this movie, but everything just kind of fails. He was trying to make a very, intense, thought-provoking, yet highly entertaining action crime drama movie similar to End of Watch. But unfortunately, this movie pales in comparison to End of Watch. For example, in End of Watch, the main cop characters are played by Jake Gyllenhaal and Michael Pena, and the reason their partnership works so well is because you have really believable and really well-written dialogue mixed with some incredible chemistry between the two characters that I've yet to see in any other movie. Their chemistry is off the chain. I felt like I was watching two actual cops that were really good friends both inside of work and outside of work. And that's what Bright lacks. You have the two main characters of Will Smith and Joel Edgerton as this orc, and any opportunity to make them feel like actual people and give them, good banter in the police car, or just to make them have a good friendship, is completely thrown away for what is instead replaced with arguing. In End of Watch, the main characters did occasionally argue, but for the most part their conversations were some really funny banter and just general conversations that you would have with a friend that may not mean anything, but were, something that you would take advantage of when you're alone with a friend. In Bright, all they do is argue. Like 90% of their dialogue together is them shouting at each other. There is one point in the movie that I think is meant to be banter, but it instead comes across as awkward. And it really just doesn't work. I can see that David Ayer was trying to capture the same kind of feel and spirit as End of Watch, but it completely falls flat on its face. Also, I might as well mention this whilst I'm on the lines of dialogue, is that the writing in this movie is pretty bad. I mean, there are some lines in this movie that are just straight up cringeworthy, and then you have other moments that, like I said before, are intended to be funny but just aren't. And it just really, really doesn't work, especially for the fact that everything in this movie is played for a very dark, very serious tone. Whereas in End of Watch, yes, you did have this very dark, very serious story that was happening, but they found ways in the dialogue and the chemistry between the characters to make certain things feel light-hearted along the way. You know, like you would genuinely do if you were in this kind of situation with a friend. No matter how dark or how bad the situation gets, if someone is feeling under pressure or if someone is feeling terrified, you will genuinely try to make them feel better by maybe cheering them up or something, or just try and make the whole situation more light-hearted despite the fact that you might die. In this movie, it's all serious and it just doesn't work. There is one line that kind of sort of made me laugh, and it's not even that big of a line. There's this one moment where Jacoby and Ward, Will Smith and Joel Edgerton's characters, are walking through a house that has where the shootouts basically just happened, and they're seeing all these dead bodies. And Joel Edgerton's character, the orc, picks up this huge, what looks like a rocket launcher shotgun kind of thing, and he says, "Whoa, that's a big gun." And then the first thing that Will Smith immediately does is take away the big gun and give Joel Edgerton's character his smaller gun. And then Joel Edgerton replies with, "Oh, I like that gun." That was a genuinely funny piece of dialogue. I kind of butchered it in my delivery, but I, to be honest, wasn't really giving a shit. But that is only genuinely the funniest line in the movie that I found. And seeing that it's such a small moment kind of shows what kind of quality of writing we're getting here. The fact that everything else sucks, but that one tiny little moment works, just kind of shows how shit it is. Now, like I said at the start of the review, I found this movie to be incredibly boring. And this is mainly down to one main thing, and that's the fact that this movie, like I said, has been set up to be something different, to be something unique. Which isn't really saying much, seeing that the plot is incredibly generic and very predictable. And I think that's why I found it so boring. All of these cool action set pieces that happen in the movie, and all of these, you know, really intense moments, just don't work because they're just within a very, 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 very predictable story, which I just found to be incredibly uninteresting, especially once the halfway point came around. Because at the start I was like, okay, I don't quite know what I'm in for, but I'll try and make the most of it. And just as the movie kept going, I just lost my interest more and more and more, because it was just going down so familiar territory that I was just like, okay, this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen. Oh, what do you know? That happened. The acting in the movie is honestly nothing special. I mean, even Will Smith can't save this movie. I thought he was fine. He just plays Will Smith. He doesn't look like he's that invested in the role. He just looks like he's there because he has to be there. And that pretty much applies to everyone else in the movie. Joel Edgerton is again fine, but I couldn't really tell whether he was phoning it in or not because of the amount of orc makeup that's on his face. Noomi Rapace is fine. The Ramirez guy who was in that shitty remake of Point Break, he's fine. Everyone is fine. No one's spectacular, but no one's terribly shit either. They're just on this line of okay acting. The last major thing I want to note about this movie is the editing. The editing is incredibly choppy in places, to the point where it looked like it had been done by someone who had been given editing software for the first time. Just like, oh, this transition looks cool, I'm going to do 12 of these in a space of like 5 minutes. The editing is pretty atrocious in a few points, especially the opening titles. I never thought opening titles would be edited that badly, and to be honest, the opening titles of a movie or a TV show or anything like this should be the last thing you think about. but the fact that I'm coming back to it and addressing it in this video just kind of proves the point. As you can tell, I really didn't like Bright. These two genres should just stay on their own things. They do not work at all together, and the fact that they're trying to make them work together just makes it not work even more. I mean, I don't quite know what else to say. This is a failure of a movie that has a couple of tiny redeeming aspects that are unfortunately not enough to make me like the movie in any sort of way. It's not good. It's really not good, which is why I'm going to give Bright a 4.5 out of 10. I really wish David Ayer would just try and make just a simple, straightforward, good movie rather than trying to be ambitious and ballsy like he was with Bright. And to be honest, the movie wasn't even that ballsy. It just went down a really straightforward and generic path that we'd all seen a million times before. So guys, that was my review of Bright. I hope you enjoyed it, and that's probably also going to be my last review of 2017. There were some movies that I really wanted to see before the year ended, but unfortunately I just didn't get around to doing so. But I'm really looking forward as to what 2018 brings, and I hope to see way more movies than I did this year. In 2018, I've got a huge long list of movies that I really want to see. But that being said, 2017 was a fantastic year. Thank you ever so much for everyone who's watched my videos or subscribed to my channel in that point. Thank you again for getting me to 100 subscribers. I can't thank you enough. My next video will be released next week, and it should be my best of 2017 list. I hope you're looking forward to that. If you enjoyed the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Bye!